welcome to Combat Thoughts. I'm Robbie.
I'm Lee.
And I'm Alex.
We're going to take a deeper look at culture and philosophy behind martial arts.
First taste of martial arts for me was just, primary school. Another kid in my class did judo. So I just went along with him one night. That got me started in martial arts just to begin with, for about 3 or 4 years, and then got to secondary school, stopped with judo, went sort of football, and then just kind of fell out of sport altogether, to be honest, from about like mid kind of secondary school. And then didn't find any kind of sport again until uni, and that was judo again. Don't really know why. And had a big Mohican and piercings and all sorts of shit at uni. So I don't know what got me back into judo.
Is there any reason you went back to the martial arts side of things when you got to uni? Because you could have done anything.
I can't really think. Yeah, that's the thing. I can't think of a single thing. You know what I mean? It's like people that you always hear like Jean-Claude Van Damme was my hero, or watching Rocky or any of this sort of stuff. But really everything I was living like a really typical student lifestyle. I was not in any way set up for getting involved in combat sports at that time. So I've got no idea what it was. But then, that kind of, the whole kind of progression to where I am has kind of been a little bit like that. It's like first time I saw MMA was, old clips of Pride and stalker kicks and head stomps. And I was just like, nah, I'm not interested in this. That doesn't appeal to me at all. And then, progressed now, and, I've fought pro and done all sorts. So, it was all kind of just almost haphazard. I never set out to compete in MMA or anything like that.
You got lured in by a good table at a freshers fair.
Exactly. That's it, man. Yeah. That could have even been it, going around sort of the...
It happens to people. I signed up for the American football team. I'm 5'7".
Yeah, one of my housemates did the same. He got involved in cheerleading as a way to meet cheerleaders, he claims. Which makes sense, I guess. But yeah.
I can't fault the logic.
Yeah, I know. Well, if you're going to meet cheerleaders, the cheerleading squad is probably the place to go, right?
Yeah. As a guy joining the MMA Society at university, that choice was obviously not motivated by trying to meet girls, and it was not a strong choice there. There was a sausage fest of a club. I like to think that we kind of balanced the ratios out a bit and made it a bit more inviting by the end, but not when I joined.
Yeah. It's always like that, isn't it? Like anything like that. And I guess that, I don't know, it's like that MMA as a whole now, isn't it? You're seeing so many more women getting involved, and you still hear those guys been like, oh no, I can't watch a woman get smacked in the face and stuff. It's like, come on, it's a sport, man. Like, they're athletes, they're just doing their thing. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. So how long was the judo your main focus for when you got to university?
Probably not even a massive amount of time. Maybe like 6 months, something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it wasn't huge. I'd got back into it, but the rules had changed a lot from like when I was a kid. Even down to things like you can't grab the legs, and so essentially like a double leg, being illegal, and all that sort of stuff. The ability to like grade without competing that had come in, so you could get black belts that had never actually fought in competition. It was all,
I was going to say, that's a pet peeve of Robbie's, that one.
Yeah, it's just a bit weird. Like, I remember, certainly when I was a kid, you fought for your grade, you had to know the theory and stuff for each belt and whatever, but ultimately, if you couldn't compete and earn your belt, then you didn't get it.
I mean, that always, it's kind of a fine line. I mean, I'm not against people being able to grade without winning. I don't think that should be the prerequisite. The fact that you should, have to be a champion in blue belt to become a purple belt or something like that. And I also don't think that you should force people to compete to grade. Like, especially the older guys doing it, would definitely like them to be able to progress.
Yeah.
But I just don't understand why people who are sort of, of sound body and doing the sport in their youth, and it's not a sport where you're going to get head trauma, how you'd get to black belt in a martial art without doing any of the martial bit of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think for me as well, I mean, I do kind of get it. Like, I've known people who just, do a martial art. It's just a hobby at the end of the day. They just do it in their spare time, something to fill their evenings with. They're not worried about competing. But if that person was to get a black belt in 2 years or 3 years, you're then a bit like, well, how does that work? It's like, loads of people I know who do BJJ. They've got no real interest in competing BJJ. And that's fine. They can go on and they can grade really well. I don't think you have to compete to grade. I think again, like I say, it's a fine line, isn't it? If you're not competing, but you still earn a black belt in a very short space of time, that seems a little bit odd in, like you say, a martial art.
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of get it with Ju-Jitsu, actually, and maybe Judo as well to an extent, because you can train those sports 100% in class and go for it. You are still competing in a role, whether it's a competition or otherwise. But I mean, I always think that Jiu-Jitsu especially pushes people towards competing. I mean, I don't know any other martial art where as many people compete as in Jiu-Jitsu, and people who you wouldn't expect to compete always seem to jump in, even if it's just for 1 or 2. There's something about Jiu-Jitsu that really encourages people to do it.
I think, certainly with Jiu-Jitsu, it's kind of certainly recently it's got a real reputation of being just like an all-encompassing, kind of very welcoming sport for people. So you do get, you'll be on the mats with all sorts of people. Like I've trained with like guys who like brickies and carpenters and barbers like myself, and then you've got guys who are like work in a lab, where they're surgeons, they're doctors. Such a mix of people training together, and then they're still comfortable to then go and compete, because again, even the competitions are quite, I've always found anyway, to be honest, they're relatively unintimidating. Obviously you get your gyms all sat together in their matching t-shirts and all this sort of stuff, and then you get your odd kind of coaches flaring up and having fights on the mats and stuff like that every so often, when decisions don't quite go their way. But I don't know, I think people like to, I'll just see how I get on. I want the experience, I want the adrenaline rush, I'll see what all the fuss is about.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I've definitely seen my coach screaming at referees, especially here and there, with points not allocated. But
the point system surely is a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, we'll not dig into that too much. I wonder if it's because, and I will get back to the whole MMA martial arts story in a minute. I know we've got off on a huge tangent here about Jiu-Jitsu. I wonder if Jiu-Jitsu not being a spectator sport kind of helps that, because it's not like going into a cage where you've got okay, there's 2 of you, you're the only 2 fighting, and there's like 500 people watching you minimum, more in a big arena. Whereas Jiu-Jitsu, there are people around the side.
Because even with Thai boxing, when you do an interclub, some idiot turns up with 50 of his mates who he's told it's a fight, and they're all there screaming, thinking it's a real fight. There's always somebody like that. You never get that at BJJ comp.
Yeah, that's true. I guess, realistically, people, if you're at a BJJ comp, you're either, competing or you're part of the gym. So you're someone who does the sport. It's like at MMA shows, like the guys that kick off in the crowd. It's never the MMA fighters or people who train even casually in MMA. It's always they're drunk mates who have come along and seem to start trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've not got the same jeering, and you've not got it's not the same pressure in a jiu-jitsu competition, because especially most of them, at least when it's not a show, it's kind of diluted, because if there's another 10 mats with people on there, you're like, well, at least not everyone's watching me. I've done matches where I don't think anyone in my team realized I was competing and actually saw me do it. You can just get lost even if you know you're...
Yeah, there's always that moment in there where you hear your name somewhere and you have no idea. You know, I mean, you're like halfway through eating your lunch or something and whatever, and you always see people die into different mats. And it's a very, I mean, it's a stressful environment, and it's certainly your adrenaline's going to be going and stuff like that. But you're right. I think when there's not such an immediate risk like head trauma or just serious injury and stuff like that. Like even you see clips on YouTube or a BJJ comp, there doesn't seem to be the same attitude of like, keep the submission until the referee tells you to stop. You know what I mean? As soon as they feel their opponent tap, they let go, with a few notable exceptions, obviously, but generally, people are pretty good. They just let go and, they shake hands, and that's that.
Yeah, it's not really, you don't really get the same problems in jiu-jitsu. It's just chronic injuries that really affect people.
Exactly.
Everybody's limping to the mat. That's the big one.
No knees, no lower back, your neck's all crooked, but people will let go before they break your arm.
You have a hug afterwards. That's fine. Unlike an MMA show where the safest place probably sometimes is in the cage.
Yeah, exactly.
So to get back to it, right? So judo, 6 months. Rules have changed quite a lot in the meantime. What was the next transition? Like, why'd you leave judo?
So weirdly, it was actually an injury in judo. So I injured my arm. Nothing major. It was just sort of got a little bit hyperextended where somebody landed on it. And I just started. That's when I sort of started watching MMA a little bit more. So my transition to starting MMA, I kind of went in whilst coming back from an injury, which is a little bit weird. But I don't know why that was that point. So for a while, I kind of trained judo alongside MMA, and I'd do a class of MMA, and then I'd be like, oh, sorry, I've got to run off. I'd have my gear in my bag, and I'd run off down the road and go to judo. And then eventually it was just like, judo's just got a bit of shit. I'm just going to actually commit to the MMA. This is way more fun. Like, there's punching and kicking and all sorts of good stuff. So that was the transition, really. So
you don't really know. Wait, hang on. So you don't know why you joined judo. You don't really know why you moved over to, like, after you got to MMA, you knew it was more fun, but you don't know why you went to MMA in the first place.
No, it literally, this is the thing. It just, like, I always hear people talking about their big influences of getting into combat sport and stuff like that. And I'm like, nah, I didn't. It's not like, I always enjoyed martial arts films when I was a kid and whatever, but I never had this big dream of like, and I think a lot of guys, you can see it in gyms as well. You see these guys coming in, and maybe they're about to do their first in the club or something like that, and they're really like kind of bashful about it. And I don't know, it's like, that's fine, because you see these people on TV like, oh, I always knew I was going to be a champion, I was going to change the world, and I was going to make my millions and stuff. And it's like, well, I don't think a lot of people genuinely get into it for that reason. I mean, they either stumble into it, or they think, oh yeah, it'll be a good way to keep fit or build confidence or whatever it might be. And I think some people feel a little bit almost like, oh, if I don't have this grand reason, then I don't know, it's almost not as like, not worthy, that's not the word I'm looking for, but legitimate, something like that. I don't know. Yeah, but no, I just fell into it, to be honest.
No, I mean, I know what you mean. I know what you mean, because I have no idea why I started competing. I know why I started martial arts. It's because I was a really fat child and my mum wanted me to do exercise. That's why I started karate back in the day, and taekwondo. Don't know why I kept it up though. Don't know why I was like, I'm going to start doing competitions. And then after taekwondo, I was like, I want to actually punch something, kickboxing, Muay Thai. Yeah. Suddenly I'm doing Ju-Jitsu and MMA and everything.
To be fair, mine was similar. I was a fat kid, but before that I did karate. I ran out of a karate gym. My dad taught me as a kid. But I did have an inspiration. I watched too much Dragon Ball Z and was like, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, that's another one. Yeah.
But do you know why you started competing and stuff?
See, that one I do kind of remember, but again, it was a really impulsive thing. So I used to work the gym that I used to train at in Reading, Gods of War. They used to have Berserker Brawls, so that was their inner club. Yeah, really yeah, we used to have like obviously a few of the guys from Exile used to come up for it, and they were really good. And there was one coming up, and some of the guys who were on the fight team at the time. This is way before I was anywhere near looking to be on a fight team or anything like that. I was just the skinny kid with kind of a shit Mohican, kind of coming to some of the classes and seeing what was going on. And one of them just in passing was like, oh yeah, you should just jump in and do a grappling match or something. And I was like, yeah, all right, why not? And that was it. I just put my name forward, and yeah, just me and one of the other guys from the gym just had a grappling match, and that was how it all started, really.
Yeah, but again, I kind of feel that because it feels almost like there wasn't a big reason. It's not like you're going out to test yourself. Not like you're like, I need to do this. You're just like, just kind of end up competing somehow, and you end up on the grappling mat. The ref suddenly between you just go, why?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's that classic thing. Because obviously, like, it was in the cage in the gym as well. So it's almost that classic thing. You know, you hear the door lock behind you. It's like, fuck. How has this happened? But no, I mean, that was kind of my first taste. So other than sort of judo competition when I was like a really young kid, which I hated. I used to hate competing in judo. I'd get myself really worked up about it. I just didn't enjoy it at all. And then, grappling match at the inner club, that was fine. Did another inner club from there. And then, that was it. Next one was a show, I think. Might have done a couple more inner clubs, but and before I knew it, I, was fighting amateur. My first amateur fight, I looked like I'd been hit by a truck. I literally, I think I worked part-time at HMV at that time, and I went in like the Monday after, and my boss was like, if any customer asks, just tell them you were in a car crash. And I was like, okay. I was like, okay, cool. But I fought on Saturday absolutely bad, and I was back in the gym on Monday. So, I clearly had it had hooked me by that stage, definitely.
Did you win the first one?
No.
Oh no.
No, I ended up, so I thought,
very much no.
Yeah.
It's kind of good if you've been beaten up and your face is swollen, but you've won. You can kind of pass it a bit. It hurts a bit more if your face is swollen afterwards and you've lost.
Oh no, it was. Oh god, I took the fight. Ended up being fairly short notice. I can't remember the guy's name, but it turned out he was like some sort of Midlands boxing champion or something. And I mean, I made it into the second round at least, so that was good. But solid. I think by that stage the ref was like, "Nah, you're done, mate." So that was that first one out of the way.
But you came back.
Yeah, so I went. I think I had 9 or 10 amateur fights. So I think I lost the first one, won sort of 3 or 4, lost another one, stuff like that. So kind of, I had an all right run at amateur, some good fights. Obviously, like everyone, I had the situation where you end up kind of fighting people that were like late notice step-ins and stuff like that. So you don't really gain as much from your your amateur career as you could have done. I think that's one thing my coach at the time, and now my coach again, Phil Else, who used to run Gods of War, he used to say at amateur, like, yeah, well, we want you to fight these guys that are going to like drag you into deep water. You know, we want you to fight guys. We want you to lose almost. You know, it's like we don't want you to get hurt, but you need these experiences of, you know, fighting like aggressive wrestlers or really skilled strikers and stuff like that who are going to really push you in different areas. So that and even stuff like fighting southpaws, you know, like the orthodox fighters kryptonite. If you can fight some southpaws at amateur, you kind of get that unknown entity out of the way. And I was booked to fight some southpaws. I think every single one fell through. So I never fought a southpaw, and then my first pro fight was against a southpaw. So
I always wonder about that though, because coaches, managers, whatever they are at amateur, because they all end up being the same person anyway. I know I always hear people say, okay, record doesn't matter. You want to fight all these people to get different looks. But was your goal to turn pro at that time? Were you aiming to make a living out of that?
After a while, yes. I mean, definitely not immediately. I mean, again, it was kind of like, yeah, I'm going to take some fights. I'm going to, you know, see how I find it, just doing it for fun. But I think, yeah, once you get the bug, I mean, I don't think I ever thought, oh yeah, I'm going to make a career out of this. Like, this is going to pay my mortgage. But yeah, the idea of fighting pro was sort of in my mind. So yeah, I could definitely understand the logic of saying, oh yeah, get these experiences now. But it's one of them, again, I can appreciate that now in retrospect. Like at the time, you know, I understood that and I thought, yeah, that's true. But equally, your ego then steps in and says, I don't really want to fight these guys and lose or whatever. But yeah, definitely now I'd say, like, if you're amateur, just fight, just get the experience. You know, don't be stupid, obviously, and have a fight every week and, you know, be out with God knows what kind of head trauma before you know it. But yeah, be sensible, provided you've got a good coach who you trust and you can get on some, you know, reliable shows and they're well matched and stuff like that. Like, yeah, there's no reason not to get as much experience as you possibly can, really.
Yeah, I mean, the head trauma side of things is a big deal at the moment. I feel like in the past few years, or maybe a little longer than that, the past 5 or 6 years, people have really started changing their tack on it. But I kind of wonder, like, I very much like to think that you don't need to put yourself in positions where you're getting massive amounts of head trauma to be really good. But then you do hear a lot of professionals disagreeing with that. Like you know, you have to spar. Well, not that they say you have to have head trauma, but you have to spar hard and you have to go through that situation. Do you think you need to get the experience you need for professional? Do you think you need to have gym wars, or do you think the sort of softer approach is the right way?
It is difficult. I mean, I think it can really depend on the person. I think, you know, light technical sort of play sparring, like that typical sort of like Thai approach to sparring, can be really beneficial. You know, it gives you, you know, you're training your eyes or your fight IQ, all these things. You know, your flow. Things become more instinctive, and you don't have the fear of accidentally getting knocked out. But then, I know obviously there's a lot of other things in the middle before you get to like the opposite end of the scale. But the opposite end, I think, I mean, I think hard sparring definitely has a place, but within an actual team, you know, like that team, it needs to be established like that. Basically, you need to trust each other. Like if you catch them, you're not just going to get bloodlust and go after them and start smashing them to pieces. You know, it's like if you've hurt them, yeah, you want to hurt them, and you can, you know, not you want to hurt them. That's not what I mean. You know, if you catch them flush.
No, I get it. Like we had a whole podcast on that, like wanting to hurt them, but also not wanting to hurt
Yeah,
them.
exactly. Yeah, you want to just, there's a fine line, and I think it takes a certain degree of experience to be able to spar like that. I still remember like years ago, again, Phil, coach, when he was getting ready for a fight, and it was the first time that I was thrown into like one of his like shark tanks to just help him. And at this time I would have been like one of the last guys in there, so he was exhausted. And initially, I just wouldn't really hit him properly because, again, I still didn't have that kind of gauge to know, like, okay, yeah, cool, I can hit you this hard, but oh no, that's too hard, or whatever. Just reading person. I think there's definitely a place for that, but yeah, it needs to be with teammates that just know where that line is, basically, and with coach who can, yeah, keep an eye on it as well. When you've got guys going into the gym, just two guys, closed door session, beating the shit out of each other, that's maybe not the best approach.
I think you're right what you said at the end there as well. There's a real important role of the coach to be able to control it, and because sometimes you do lose your head, and sometimes you do kind of both go for each other, and like you need that coach who's got eyes on, who's like, "Whoa, stop now!" Like end of the round, call it there, because you can go too far. Like, I've lost my head in sparring probably more times than I'd like to admit.
Well, that's it. I mean, but that's another important part of it, isn't it? I guess is like learning to kind of control your temper. Because ultimately there's always times someone will like catch you or.
We can't hear you, mate.
Any better?
I can hear you fine.
Yeah.
Lee, can you hear him?
Yep.
It's just me who can't.
Yeah.
All right. Any better?
Oh, he's back. Never mind. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your flow. I assumed Lee couldn't hear you either.
No.
You just ruined the podcast, Robbie.
Oh, I'm sorry, guys. It's all my fault.
I can't remember what I was thinking right now.
Oh, fuck.
You're saying about
it kind of, I don't know,
your
temper and stuff like that. Like when people catch you, and yeah, we've all had it. Like you're rolling. Maybe you're just exhausted, or they've caught you with a technique that they shouldn't have caught you with, or something like that. And you feel like they're going a bit harder than they should be, and rather than just being like, oh, can we just cool it down a bit? You find yourself raising it up as well, and thinking, oh well, I'll just hit them hard as well. And then before you know it, this 100-kilo guy has decided to put you through the floor, and it's like, well, that doesn't really help anyone.
I think that's a big one as well, is the weight side of it. I think gyms I grew up in as a kid were always just like, just spar with everybody. And actually, when I'm 61 kilos and this guy's 98 and 10 years older than me and I'm 17, it's like, no, I shouldn't be doing hard sparring with this guy. Like, that is dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like, again, I think, if that guy is like an experienced, athlete, whatever the combat sport might be, if they're experienced, it's maybe a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they've got kind of like the wherewithal, like, because we all know what it's like sparring. Say kickboxing is a really good example of this. If you get someone in on like day one, or okay, maybe not day one, they should not be sparring on day one, but they're really, really new, but they're just at the point of starting to spar. They can be the worst people to spar. They always make you look shit, because you can't possibly predict what they're going to do, because they don't even know what they're going to do. So it's just a nightmare, and they end up like accidentally throwing like a really hard leg kick or kicking you in the balls or something stupid like that. And it takes a certain degree of experience not to get wound up about that. And again, but I think you're right. Choice of sparring partners can be massive, especially coming back to sort of the whole head trauma debate and stuff like that. I mean, certainly if you're getting ready for a fight and you're doing like hard, if you want to call them shark tank rounds or whatever, and you get thrown in some 90-kilo guy who just wants to beat the shit out of someone, that no one's going to come out of that looking good, really.
I've got my own thoughts on why beginners make people look terrible, because they do. Like almost universally, sparring beginners makes you look terrible. I think it's because they don't know the danger that they're in. Because the way to beat a beginner, I think, a way to beat someone who's less experienced than you, is to pressure them and scare them. Because you hit them, they'll cover up. The trouble is that when you get because you know, beginners go against beginners, like they don't go that, like they can go mental, but they sometimes back off. I always find but also you can't pressure a beginner like that, otherwise you're the dick. It's very hard to get to the position where you can let someone know that they're in a dangerous situation, they shouldn't just go mental, but also not beating them up. And it takes quite a lot of experience to do that, I think.
Definitely.
And beginners sparring beginners is the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, especially like young, you know, because I've been in gyms before as well, where you've got like young guys from like 15, 16, 17, and they kind of spar together, and it's very much like just like pubescent sparring, man. It's just a hormonal, like I'm the big dog here, you're not going to beat me, I'm going to beat you, and it's just like, oh my god. But then I get, you know, we've all been that guy at some point, like without a doubt, and some people still are, no matter how old they get. So yeah, it's just one of those things, I guess.
Again, though, that's the coach part, isn't it? That's where the coach needs to come in and tell these people not to spar each other. The worst ones I've seen are always where people come in and they organise their own sessions. Come in on their own at the weekend without a coach there. You just see people laying into each other. The closed doors ones, it's like you said.
Yeah, the like open mat bloodbath sparring, and it's just like, oh my god, just stop.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing as well. I think the kind of the methodology within coaching and stuff is obviously rapidly evolving. Like, there's not that many. Well, that I can name, I don't actually know of any kind of MMA coaches at an even remotely high level who still have like a really old school mentality of like, you have to bleed in training, you have to be, getting thrown in, and that kind of almost like the old school boxing mentality. You watch the old sparring footage from Mike Tyson just knocking people out, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, like. There's not many coaches left that are like that. I think they've all started just thinking a bit more, I guess, maybe about brain trauma, because everyone knows about it now.
Yeah, and I think what concerns me a bit is that there's a bit of an attitude that to become great at striking and MMA, you have to start sparring from quite a young age. And as far as I can tell, that sparring at a really young age is when it's most detrimental.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's people who.
But so not only is it the most detrimental, getting hit in the head at a young age, but it's also when you're hitting each other in a stupid, hard way and scrapping it. I always think it's a bit of a concern that people feel like they have to spar that young in order to become good later on. Whereas, I mean, I don't want to base everything I'm saying on like freak athletes, but Israel Adesanya only started kickboxing in his early 20s, I think.
Yeah.
I don't want to pick. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, but then I guess, it is difficult with not picking like freak kind of. It's like sort of looking at Ronnie Coleman for like bodybuilding or something, and you know what I mean. But I see what you mean. But then he's a prime example of someone who walked in and was like, well, I want to be a world champion. I want to be an MMA world champion. So the story goes, so his coach was like, well, we're going to make you a kickboxing world champion first, and sort of built him up. And I mean, well, by the sound of it, he obviously committed his life to it and became amazing because of it, and then made his transition to MMA. But I mean, to have not even been kickboxing at all until you're into your 20s, and to do that is amazing, no matter how you look at it. Whether you're a freak athlete or not, that's still crazy.
Yeah, because at the younger age, I always thought it was around being comfortable and experimenting. So that play sparring, get comfortable, like try and throw a spinning back kick. Like, oh, it's shit, but you like it, or you're good at it, or oh look, you've got a good rear head kick or I don't know, try an axe kick or whatever. Like just experiment with your body, see what you're good at, see if you're a puncher or a wrestler or whatever. And then when you're looking to compete and you're a bit older and it's in like a camp as we've gone to, but when you're then ready to compete, up the sparring a bit. I listened to Leon Edwards on Joe Rogan, and he was saying he doesn't spar outside of camp. He was saying in camp he does because he's preparing for a fight and he's kind of conditioned himself to be hit in the face. Whereas out of camp, it's let's learn technique, let's learn new skills, let's get comfortable. To me, I think it's the same with kids. You let kids grow accustomed to striking or wrestling or whatever, and then the intensity just dials up when they're ready to compete.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, it's like, I mean, if you like with a fight camp, obviously, typically, maybe if you've got a long camp and you can build it around, like, say, 12 weeks. I mean, even then, you know, you could split that up. So your first 4 weeks, you're building up into your camp. You know, your second 4 weeks, that's where you'd get your much harder sparring in. Maybe if you're going to do really hard sparring, that's where it's going to be. And then your final 3 or 4 weeks, you're still sparring, but yeah, you're not doing heavy sparring. You're not looking to pick up injuries. You're kind of tapering to the fight, and yeah, dialing in those, you know, finer skills. But then yeah, it's right. If you work in fight camps, then definitely between camps, you want to be working your skill set. Surely, yeah.
You mentioned about you mentioned that Adesanya was one of those guys who came into the gym wanting to be a champion. I don't want to focus too much on the freak athletes and the champions because I'm a bit more interested in how it affects most people, sort of normal people training. And one thing that you hear quite often, and quite a lot of hardcore guys promoting, is if you're not intending to be the best in the world, you shouldn't do it. You must have heard people saying this before.
Yeah.
Do you think that's legit? Do you think that's a pile of shit? Because I think I know where I lean.
I think that's absolute bullshit. I think if you apply that logic to everything, no one would fucking do anything. You know what I mean? Like, why do something if you can only be like the number one in the world at it? Just go and do it. I mean, yeah, it's difficult because, like, you know, if you're competitive, like I'm really competitive. And certainly I think growing up and over the past few years, and even now to a degree, you know, certain things I'll just kind of have that mindset like, well, if I can't win, then I don't want to play. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm shit at Scrabble. I don't want to play Scrabble because I know I won't win. You know what I mean? But it's like, but if you enjoy it, just do it, you know. And I think, yeah, MMA, there's more. I think there is a bit more of that now because people are starting to tout it as, you know, just get fit, just learn some new skills, do something. If you then want to take it a bit further, that's cool. You don't have to. It's becoming a bit more accessible to people, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought it kind of detracts from what the actual value of stuff like Ju-Jitsu and MMA could be. Because I get that you can make a shit ton of money by being the best in the world, but I just don't feel like that's the main benefit. I feel there's a lot to learn for just normal guys. But then you get people like, I've heard Matt Brown saying it. Matt Brown, when he retired before, he said he retired because he didn't think he could be the best in the world, and he doesn't think you should do it if you can't be the best in the world. He came back, so clearly he sees some benefit in it. But
yeah.
I always think it's kind of a shame.
He just offers the right fight, you know, the right fight for the right money.
Or someone turned up outside his house with a truck full of dollar bills or something.
Yeah,
certainly that would get anyone in the cage, right? So,
yeah. I've always thought there's a lot of benefit for it, especially for like the, you know, even outside of the sport, the community aspect and all that. I always think it's kind of a shame that you'd think you'd have to be some ultra competitor to even dip your toe in.
I think socially is a big one. Sorry, socially is a big one. Like, if you look at how many kids you've seen in the gym who like 14, 15, 16, who quiet, timid, maybe a bit awkward, and might flourish and come out of the shell because of martial arts, you lose that because them kids are not going to turn up and go, I'm going to be a world champ.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think, and that's the thing. I think and that can kind of apply to anyone as well, whether it's kids growing up or, you know, adults coming in who maybe just aren't that confident, or, and I mean, you know, it's always nerve wracking going into any new gym. Like, even if you're, you know, experienced and you know what you're doing, if you move or you just go to train at a new gym or whatever, you're still going to be nervous walking through the door. So for someone like brand new coming into that environment, obviously it's going to be intimidating, but yeah, you can quickly get like a real, almost like family kind of environment, I think, in the right gym. You know, you'll always have your kind of key friends, I'm sure, you know, within that, obviously, but I think, yeah, it can be a real, like, massive part of people's lives, and it will have nothing to do with making money or being the best in the world. It just makes their life a little bit better, or yeah, whatever it might be, you know?
Well, that's it. As we come out of lockdown, you've got two people here, me and Robbie, who are going to be new gym goers somewhere. So we'll have the nerves of going in and figuring out who the enforcer is and having a chat with them.
Exactly.
You know what? I'm all right. I am such a creonch that at this point, turning up to new gyms it's actually stopped being nerve wracking. I understand what you're saying, like turning up in new gyms with new people, right? I've just quit on so many places now. I've had just zero gym loyalty. Just walked into so many places that, you know.
My fear is I get in and somebody goes, "Oh, you're that dickhead with an opinion on a podcast. Let's beat the shit out of you."
See, I didn't like that thing you said.
Yeah.
Exactly, I'm gonna make you think for it now. Yeah.
Fortunately, we are not even close to that famous, so I wouldn't worry too much about that one.
That's it, mate.
What do you always think about this? What do you think about, like, people cross training, going to other places? Do you think, because I think it's a bit more of an old school mentality. I don't think it's something that's so prevalent nowadays, but it definitely used to be a thing. Like, no one calls anyone a creonch. Well, partly because we're not Brazilian and don't speak Portuguese, but also because, you know, no one calls anyone a traitor nowadays. Although, you know, now and then they do. I reckon if someone hopped over from Exile to Gym 01 or vice versa, you know, they don't really see eye to eye.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the situation and why it's being done and how it's handled, I guess. You know, it's like, you know, say you train at an MMA gym, but you train BJJ somewhere else. You know, I think that's fine. And I think, there's normally some sort of relationship between gyms. So maybe, you know, from an interclub, so down at Gods of War, where we'd have an interclub, we'd have a few gyms in, and that would establish a relationship. And then it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to nip down to Exile and do some sparring down there, or it's not a problem, you know. I don't really see the issue with people training at multiple gyms, but it's bit me in the arse over like the last however many years, basically since turning pro, because, you know, there's a bit of a story behind it, so I'll condense it. But Phil, the owner of Gods of War, he had to move to America. So a group of us kind of kept the gym running for a few years. And that's how I had my sort of like last couple of amateur fights during that time, and my first pro fight. The gym then closed, and so I basically was left without a head coach. So I then had 3 more pro fights without a head coach, basically controlling my own training, going to multiple places, consistent places. You know, I'd be at Exile a couple of times a week. I'd be at the same Ju-Jitsu academy, all that sort of stuff. So it's consistent places, but I was my own head coach. And personally, I just don't think that works. I think, you know, if you're going to cross train, fine, but you have to have a head coach who brings it all together and who is an MMA coach. That's the big important thing with that, I think.
What do you think you was missing by not having a head coach and doing it yourself? Like, what do you think the gaps were, like, for you?
Mate, probably just direction. You know, I think it's really easy. So like a trap I fell into was like, oh well, I'm training really hard, so that's good. You know, it's like, well, I wasn't getting like ultimately skills practice is king, you know, but I fell into the trap of like just doing more strength and conditioning, and I was, you know, working really hard and still doing skill sessions, and doing my sparring, but just my focus was too much on my strength and conditioning, and a head coach would have pulled me away from that, I think. I wouldn't have even ended up going in that direction, you know what I mean, because I would have had that structure in the first place.
Because I've heard that where like you need a coach to kind of keep you on the track of, if you're a jiu-jitsu guy, not just sticking a gi on for your training camp, and if you're a striker, just doing boxing classes. Like it helps give you that breadth of what you need to cover to get to the fight successfully.
Yeah, definitely.
I've kind of thought that, especially for me, when I was training Exile with Dan, you know, Dan obviously had all the skills aspects and you know, advised. Actually, no, I think Dan kind of just told me just train what you think is sensible in terms of skills. Actually, what I think Dan did most is tell me to not train. I remember doing one of those fitness Thai boxing classes. Dan's grappling one is afterwards. And I finished the class and Dan just comes up to me. He just goes, "Are you all right?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Go home. Go home now." I was so overtrained for that match. And I think if Dan wasn't there to like pull you back, it would have been mental. I think it's a bit different for everyone, but I think the one thing a coach can't do is be the guy who has to encourage you to get into the gym. Because as soon as he does that, that's the one thing it can't be. But everything else, I think it just depends who you are.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, for me, the big things were just the overall structure, to be honest, like having a consistent one location to train at was really is what I've missed for the last few years. And just having that direction that is kind of given to you, you know, not spoon fed. I don't think that's the case, because I think you're responsible for your own development ultimately as much as your coach is. And you're responsible for getting yourself in the gym and doing the work. But again, even like we were saying before, you know, you need that coach to be watching over your sparring, you know, seeing like, right, that's too hard, that's not hard enough, there's a weakness there that needs addressing, whatever it might be. And telling you to take your foot off the pedal every so often and saying, right, this session, just cut this session out this week, go home, go to bed.
So one thing I wonder is how much, I'll explain this one in a little bit. How much trust do you think you should put into your coach in that case? Because the thing that puzzles me is that people do say, some people think you should have a coach who just tells you everything and you just put your head down and you fucking do it. Do you think that's the right attitude, or do you think it's more, do you think you should, because Ryan Hall, for example, said he got really good by questioning everything his coach told him. So what do you think is the right approach?
I hate to be the one that just says somewhere in the middle, but I definitely, I think just from like being someone that your coach wants in the class perspective, if you question absolutely everything, your coach is probably going to fucking hate you. But I think, it'll be like trying to coach the Riddler. It would just get out of hand. But I think there is definitely a time and place for that. And ultimately you need to pick and choose things as well. It's like, well, my coach is like a 6 foot tall heavyweight. I'm a 5'7" flyweight. There are going to be things that they might coach that wouldn't apply to me, or whatever, or just some things that. Or again, that's a whole other issue as well. If your coach is somebody who actually still trains themselves, that then changes the dynamic as well. Because I think that is quite rare. A lot of coaches stand on the outside, whereas I think if you have a coach who also still trains or competes, they might fall into just teaching their style and teaching how they fight, and that can obviously become an issue. So I think, yeah, there's a fine balance in that. I think definitely.
My main issue with just trusting what coaches say is that, all right, so the main reason people pick gyms is that they live near to them. That's the main reason you pick gyms, right? So most of the time, you've picked a coach because he's the coach at the gym that you live near to. There's not a good criteria for picking someone to train with. Or maybe you're lucky, maybe you've got 2 or 3 to choose from. It's not more than that.
Mm.
And then advice that comes from coaches, it's not like, MMA is not a very well-established sport in a lot of ways. It's not like, I feel like if I went and did something like, rugby, there are some very clear guidelines on how to get good at rugby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There are very clear guidelines even on wrestling, to pick a more close example. Like people, it's in terms of physicality, it's lean muscle mass, lactic threshold, and time on the mat and time spent training. Those are your 3 clear things for picking who wins. I have no idea what they are for MMA. And the advice is so disparate and varied about what I get from MMA. I always feel like if I go somewhere, obviously they're more experienced than me and I should take everything they say into consideration. But how can I trust that it's gospel when if I'd lived 2 miles down the road, I might be talking to someone else who'd say something completely different?
Yeah, true. I think it's especially with something like MMA, like I say, it's a really young sport, to the point where, like I sort of touched on earlier, there are still some sort of more old school coaches involved in it, maybe running sort of smaller gyms or in more isolated areas or whatever. And I think that becomes a real issue because ultimately MMA is a weight class sport as well. So you then get them sort of hanging out weight cut advice and getting guys to do ridiculous things and trying to cut, 10 kilos in a week. And it just, that then again opens up a whole new can of worms, when not only are you taking gospel for your technique and how you prepare for a fight, but you're also relying on them to guide you through losing what can be quite a dramatic amount of weight in quite an aggressive way sometimes. And
I think also the level at which you're fighting at as well. So I think you're going to need, as a pro, different styles of coaching or different things to focus on than a guy who's 2 fights in. Because you see with amateur MMA coaches and kind of lower level amateur MMA coaches, they tend to be like, everybody's skill level's poor and to the left of the arc. So let's be the fittest and the strongest. Because if you can last into that 2nd and 3rd round, you've got a good chance of winning. Whereas you're however many fights in, we can bank on that you're going to be fit and be able to do 3 rounds. This is when skill becomes the big differentiator. And I think if the coach is only looking after kind of lower level fighters, you probably then need to go to a coach who's looked after pros or has coached people at this level to give you the right advice. So I don't think there's one coach for kind of every section of your career. I don't know if Greg Jackson would be as successful teaching 0-0, 0-1 fighters in the amateur levels.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. I'd not really thought of it from that kind of angle, really. But yeah, I mean, that does make sense. I mean, you can apply that to any other area of your life, can't you? Like, you outgrow a job or you outgrow the house you live in or whatever. Why wouldn't you outgrow your coach or whatever? But again, I guess that then comes down to people being called traitors and stuff like that. And it calls into like, there you go. It's like, right, well, how do you handle it? And it's that then, that's where it becomes more difficult for people, I suppose.
People can get coaches and gym owners can get very possessive over fighters. What I always think though is that it's always made worse when you see them training at another gym and you don't know why. That's always the worst thing. Like we said about this before, it's all a communication thing. Like if someone went to you, they went, "Thank you for the time you put into me. I really appreciate it, but I need to move on because of these reasons." That's one thing. When you just see someone just like, "Hey, loving my new gym," blah blah, blah, post it up on Instagram.
That's it. Yeah, all social media now and that. You can't do anything. Someone's going to find out. So you got to make sure tell them first before they see you tagged in a photo on Instagram or whatever. Yeah, definitely.
I do kind of get that though. I mean, I kind of get that though. Like being possessive is rude, but being possessive is terrible. But if you do see someone over somewhere else, it's almost like, I don't know, if you saw your mates just like all hanging out together without you, something like that. It's no different, really.
I do. I can totally understand like a coach or a gym owner or whatever being pissed off about that. Like 100%. I think again, it just comes back to actually communicating what you. I guess that again comes down to the question about do you just take what your coach says as gospel, just put your head down, listen to what they say, and it's like, well, no, actually, it should probably be more two-way. Especially, like you said, once you're beyond your first few fights and you're kind of starting to find your own style and how you like to fight. I mean, it's a bit more, it becomes more two-way. I think there is a limit to it, ultimately, if your coach can see that what you're saying to avoid a certain type of training or something like that, you just, oh no, I hate jiu-jitsu. I'm going to skip all the jiu-jitsu sessions, whatever, then they need to reel that in. But otherwise, just it's communication with your coach, I think.
Yeah. So I guess we should look at rounding it out now. One thing I'm kind of wondering is, I'm assuming, are you still planning on fighting more after this lockdown? Why are you still doing it? Why are you still doing it? And what is it that you want to do and get out of it?
Yeah.
Is this where you say you want to be the best ever and go down
just go against everything I've said?
I'm going to be the next Conor McGregor. Give me anyone.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, again, it sounds really corny. It's kind of, for me, like, it's always been, like I say, like when I was a kid, like I hated competing in judo and stuff like that. And kind of as I've got older, I'm actually able to kind of think about it a bit more and be a bit more kind of critical of what's happening. It's, for me, like the winning and losing isn't actually as important as I always kind of put the pressure on. Losing sucks. Like, losing is shit. Like, nobody can say they don't mind or whatever. But if I lose but feel like I've put on a good show, and I feel like I've shown what I can do, I've put forward a good representation of myself or my gym and that kind of thing, then that very much takes the sting off it. Mm-hmm. But I'm yet to do that. Certain, I'd argue even at amateur, I never really did that, but certainly at pro, I'm yet to actually put on a performance that I'm happy with. So it's only now that I'm gonna, it was just obviously before all the lockdowns and this absolute shit show, I was kind of, established, regular training, good team, all this sort of stuff. So can kind of start moving back into that and just get the ball rolling with it again and go from there. Start actually trying to put on some decent performances.
Nice. Yeah, well, hopefully it all goes back to normal in a couple of months. We're not too sure our gym's ever opening up again, so we're going to have to really, that's why we're ending up at new gyms. That and moving.
That and you don't live in London anymore.
Hey, I didn't live in London. We thought it closed way before I moved out of London.
That's true.
So we'll have to see how that goes. I had such big plans for 2020. Never mind.
Yeah, that's it, man. I think certainly for me, like my road back to MMA, like after my last MMA fight, which is quite a while ago now, I took a bit of time out just to focus on BJJ, and then I was like, right, after this competition, I'm going to go back to MMA. Then at that competition, I ruptured 2 ligaments in my knee, So then I had to deal with the rehab of that, and then I had different fights falling through, and then the lockdown happened. So again, man, it's all.
That is a question I'd quickly like to touch on. In the amateurs, it seems everybody and their uncle drops out of fights every time you get matched. That carry over into the pros?
I wouldn't say to the same degree, not that I've found anyway. I mean, yeah, I had one at the end of 2019. I was meant to fight in November 2019. That would have been my first fight back after quite a while. And the guy pulled out 2 days before because he'd apparently been arrested and broken his hand. But I did then see him at the show. Not up close, but I mean, his hand looks fine. I don't know what the story was behind that, but yeah, no, I think generally, if you're fighting pro, you'd hope they're going to actually be professional. So.
Yeah.
I wouldn't count on it though.
No,
I've
not
met
always.
A lot of MMA fighters, and I'm not sure I could count on that.
Yeah. Again, I guess that comes down to your gym and your coach, isn't it? What have they kind of,
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, pullouts are at a ridiculous rate in amateur, so you'd hope they'd drop a bit in pro, but
I guess
not.
Yeah, I think it does. Ultimately, it does come down to it's a dangerous sport, isn't it? And again, that comes back to how do you spar and all these sorts of questions. So. Yeah, injuries happen and stuff like that. But yeah, I think if you've got a legitimate reason for dropping out, then drop out. I've certainly made the mistake a few more than once of fighting when I maybe should have considered dropping out or whatever. But it happens. And it's all part of the game, I guess.
I mean, I've seen it the other way where they see their opponent weigh in and go, "Nah, fuck this," and just leave. So I think that probably helps the pros.
Yeah, I've seen that happen. Yeah, it's that typical thing everyone thinks of, like blind dates, and it's like, do you think they turned up and saw you and left? And it's like, yeah, they've turned up, seen how fucking jacked you are.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please consider subscribing to the podcast and checking us out on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram under the name Combat Thoughts. We'll see you next time.